This is Andrew Kamazinski at Hokkaido University of Education Asahikawa campus, and this is a flip. That is a flipped version of the classroom for the class Critical Thinking. This means that rather than lecturing in class, I lecture on YouTube, and you can watch the video as many times as you need to understand the material, and we'll use our class time to work on activities and questions and other things like that. So this is our first flip, so I am going to walk us through some of the most basic concepts in critical thinking. Please remember, if you have questions or if you have trouble understanding the English, please feel free to ask me in class. So let's get things started. So what I'm going to do is I am going to mostly work from a PowerPoint. So I'm going to look at two different claims. And we're going to start with some very basic concepts here. So for about 5 minutes, just think about these terms: assertion, convince, argument or argumentation, statement, premise, conclusion, and logical. So I'm not going to spend 5 minutes on that during the flip, but I am going to walk you through them briefly. So at least in English, assertion often has a somewhat negative meaning. Assert means to state or declare forcefully, or an assertion is a positive statement or declaration, often without support or reason, a mere assertion, an unwarranted assertion. So the danger with mere assertions is we're just saying what we want to be true, and we're not making an argument for it. So this leads us to the word convince. So the word convince has two meanings. It's to cause someone to believe firmly in the truth of something, or to persuade someone to do something. In critical thinking, we mostly mean the former. So though I do want to convince you of something, I am not trying to convince you to clean your room, or to get a part-time job, or to quit your part-time job, or to start dating someone, or stop dating someone, or anything of the sort. I want to use arguments to persuade you that something is true or not true, and to enable you to use arguments to do the same. Now, critical thinking works by understanding language in terms of arguments. So let me say that again. So in critical thinking, we look at language as arguments. So if you tell me, it's a very nice day today, in critical thinking, what we would want to understand is, what are the reasons you think it's a very nice day, and do those reasons add up to the claim? So in order to view language as arguments, we look at an argument as a sequence of statements of which one is intended as a conclusion, and the others, the premises, are intended to prove or support that conclusion. Now this means that arguments, understood in this way, are a method for inquiry with the goal of leading us to the truth. Or at a minimum, they provide a way of finding out which views are better than others. To say that in a different way, a claim that doesn't have anything behind it is a bad argument. A claim that has many supporting reasons is a good argument. So going back to today is a good day, a good argument might include that it is sunny, that you had a really pleasant conversation with one of your instructors, that you got a good grade on something, that your boyfriend or girlfriend made you lunch. There are many nice things that this could include to support that claim. Now, a statement, and this is the most basic building block, is a claim that can be either true or false. So this means if something is a statement, it either is true or it is false. So if I say, it is sunny outside, this is either the case. Either the sun is shining and we can see it, or it is not. Now, statements are usually stated as declarative sentences. So things like, the sky is blue. Not things like questions, how are you? Or what is the square root of 2? Or what is your name? Or exclamations like gosh or darn. it's difficult to see what these sorts of things would be if you have to view them as either true or false. So they don't really qualify as statements. Now there's one last category. Things like I don't like you. These are expressions of feelings. And these sorts of things, expressions of feelings like I don't like you are sometimes statements because they express a fact, I do or do not like you. But sometimes they're better thought of as something other than statements. But we'll leave that off. If anyone wants to ask in class, I can talk about it more. Now, we divide statements into two types. A conclusion is the statement you are trying to prove is true. So the word conclusion has several other uses. So it can also mean to summarize, or to wrap up, or to state your final point. But in this context, it means the statement you are trying to prove is true. Now, premises are statements that you believe are true and that can serve as the basis for further proof. So returning to our example of today is a good day, that's the conclusion. That's what we're trying to say. And the things that we say to support that are things that we say as premises. Now, all of them are statements. So let's look at a sample argument. If carbon emissions go up, then the ice caps will melt. Carbon emissions will go up. Therefore, the ice caps will melt. Our premises here are if carbon emissions go up, then the ice caps will melt, and carbon emissions will go up. These are things that we're saying if these statements are true, then we can get to this conclusion. And the conclusion here is therefore the ice caps will melt. Now, one of the hardest words to define, but one of the most important ones to define, is the word logical. Now, I've found quite a few different definitions of logical, and one of them is what we want. So one means of or according to the rules of logic or formal argument. Another one is uses sound reasoning. Another is natural or sensible given the circumstances. And finally, we could view this one as it is a logical progression to go from high school to college. Now, in our case, what we want to mean is that the things we say support the conclusion that we're working towards. And that's what we'll mean by logical in this class. The other two senses are related, but not identical. So that you should go from high school to college and not from college to high school is logical, but it's not really that linked to kind of formal argumentation. So let's look at what we could call an illogical argument under this definition. 1, I like ice cream. This is true. 2, Asahikawa is cold. This is true. Therefore, let's eat yakiniku. So we have two premises. I like ice cream and Asahikawa is cold. And from this, we are saying, let's eat yakiniku. Now let's look at a logical argument. I like yakiniku. You like yakiniku. Therefore, let's eat yakiniku. Now this is a much more logical argument because there's a connection between the premises and the conclusion. So we have yakiniku, yakiniku, and yakiniku. When we go back to the illogical argument, we have ice cream, Asahikawa is cold, and yakiniku. There's no connection, so it's not logical. So again, if it is well connected, it is more likely to be logical. So there are several simple rules that we were starting out with that will help us to decipher arguments. This will help us to understand arguments. The first rule is identify the premises and conclusion. So when we are looking at an argument, we need to know what is the argument. Now, when we do this, we should practice what is called a principle of charity. So charity is an old word for love. Now it often just means to give money. But in the past, it meant to be kind. So in this case, it means to be kind. So if we are being kind when we look at other people's arguments, we believe other people are presenting logical arguments and try to make sense of these arguments. So that means rather than trying to make someone's argument as bad as possible, we want to make it as good as possible, where it still says what they want it to say. So this also means turn what people say into arguments. So give them a conclusion and premises. So if they say many strange and random things, all to convince you that you should get a part-time job at Lawson, put all of those together as an argument with premises and the conclusion, get a job at Lawson. So there's a very helpful way to find the conclusion in arguments written in English. We call these indicator words. So these are words that point to what we're trying to do. So look for the word therefore, or ergo, or thus, or so. Usually that means it's going to be the conclusion. So let's look at this one. Cats with long hair shed all over the house, so you should not get a long-haired cat. I have heard they also have a lot of fleas. So where are the premises and where is the conclusion? So the conclusion is you should not get a long-haired cat. And both of the statements we make are designed to support that. Cats with long hair shed, that is lose hair, and cats with long hair have lots of fleas. Now I have no idea if this is true, but this adds up to that conclusion. So we're not saying these things randomly, we're trying to help reach a conclusion. So we can try a couple more arguments. So I'll read them, and then I'll give you a couple of seconds, and then I'll tell you what I think the conclusion is. Argument 1. I deserve a raise. I'm very good at my job. In this case, the conclusion is I deserve a raise. Even though there aren't any indicator words, what tells us this is the conclusion is this represents something we could try to convince someone of. The second one is just a statement that doesn't really have any sort of angle to it. There's nothing it's trying to do. It's just stating a fact. I'm very good at my job. Argument 2. Jesse is 1 year old. Most 1-year-olds can walk. It follows that Jesse can walk. In this case, the conclusion is Jesse can walk. Now, we have an indicator here. We have a hint, and it follows that. And then the two premises add up to suggesting, because Jesse is 1 year old and most 1-year-olds can walk, that he can walk, and that's our conclusion. Let's look at argument 3. Hokkaido University of Education, Asahikawa, will win the championship because they have the best team. In this case, the conclusion is Hokkaido University of Education at Asahikawa will win the championship. So the hint that we have that this is the conclusion is the word because. So the word because is an indicator that what follows is a premise, not a conclusion. Because these are the sort of things that support a conclusion. So in class, we'll look at exercise 1. But for right now, we'll just keep moving forward. So the second rule, and this is more about when you make arguments yourself than about deciphering other people's arguments, is develop your ideas in a natural order. So this means make your argument easy for your listener or reader to understand. There's 2 ways to do this. There's 2 formats we can use. Conclusion, premise, 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 or premise, 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 conclusion. To say that in a different way, either put the premises at the beginning or put the conclusion at the beginning. If you hide the conclusion in the middle, it will be hard to understand. So I'll give you 2 examples. So this is an example of premise, premise, conclusion. All whales are mammals. All mammals are warm-blooded. So all whales are warm-blooded. So that's premise, premise, conclusion. Now let's look at conclusion, premise, premise. Hokkaido University of Education, Asahikawa is a great school. It has a wonderful cafeteria, The students are very nice. So this is an example of conclusion, premise, premise. Now do exercise 2, which I'll give you time for in class. And that concludes the things that we have for now. And I hope that you enjoyed this